Welcome back, everyone. We're talking with W. Frank Wilson from the Albany Civil Rights Institute and Jim Perks. He's a former Associated Press reporter. You covered the civil rights era back in the 40s and 50s, but you have an event coming up. We'll get to that in a second. But I'm excited to ask you all these questions. What was it like to cover the civil rights?
Well, it was exciting, educational, very alarming in many respects because you saw some tough things. And I was strictly a little foot soldier. I wasn't a big name in the media, but I was there for Dr. King and others, and I saw some violence, and I saw some wonderful things happen, and heard some marvelous freedom music at the rallies and the church rallies. And
I know I talked to you right before we came on. You got to interview Dr. King and a lot of other people. Yes. What was that like?
It was great. And in those days, young people need to know this. We need to tell our stories. I didn't have a cell phone or anything like that. I had to write down with pencil on a stenographic pad, and I donated all my pads to the museum in Washington, D.C. with the quotes from King and quotes from the white supremacists and the Klan, everything. It's all, I donated that to the museum, but it was pretty awesome.
And I know we have a book here. I don't know if we can bring it up on a closer camera. This is actually a picture of him interviewing Dr. King, a very iconic picture. If you can see it right there, he's the reporter right here.
That's right.
What is, when you look back at this picture, what runs through your mind? What was this moment like for you?
How much I was still a rookie, but the interview went great. The interview, Dr. King was so eloquent. And Fred Shuttlesworth, you see on my right and left, he was wonderful copy, as we say in the press. He had wonderful quotes, and he stood up for the civil rights and freedom. But King, one thing I remember most about King was in these little churches. He'd be up on the podium, and I'd be sitting next to him, and I'd see the sweat coming down, and then hear his wonderful eloquence, and the choirs behind singing this beautiful freedom music.
And I have to ask you, as a reporter myself, we always get to hear the things that, you know, in history sometimes you don't get to hear about. What is probably the biggest thing that sticks out to you that in history books we don't hear about during that time?
I don't think we hear enough about the young people. Children were involved in that. Young college students, high school students. And while I was doing all this coverage of big events, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and their young people were getting people registered to vote or trying to. And that's the untold story still. It's what was going on behind all those demonstrations and scenes. And
Frank Wilson, how exciting is it to have a former reporter during that era come and talk to the Civil Rights Institute?
It's very exciting. I did not, when I first met Jim, I knew that we had to have him at the Civil Rights Institute. It is a wonderful opportunity. This is walking history. And I'm inviting the community out. We're especially asking parents to bring their children out. They need to know. They need to hear these stories. They are not in books. We got it firsthand, and we have a treasure that we need to take advantage of.
And I know you're having an event this coming Thursday at 6:30
at the Civil Rights Institute at 326 Whitney Avenue.
And do people just show up? Is it a free event? What's actually happening?
It's a free event. Jim is the entire evening. He will be giving accounts of things that he saw, things that he's written about. We will have a brief period at the end of the program for questions and answers, but the entire evening will be an evening with Jim Perks.
That is going to be such a fascinating evening. For you to come back down to the South, what is it like?
Well, I've been back South for a number of years, but racism is still very much alive, I'm sorry to say. But there has been a lot of progress. But still, racism is still alive, and what we need to do, people like me, is tell our story, and that particularly the young people hear it, and that we honor those who sacrificed so much in the past and who are going to be asked to do a lot in the future. And tell our story. That's important.
It is a very, very important story. We thank you both for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it, and we're glad to have you down here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Right now, we're going to head to a break. Don't get anywhere. We'll be right back.